This is an HR program on demand, a living seed capsule of work life and workplace coming live from a rooftop in Stockholm, Sweden. It's me, Ann-Marie Andrich, and
me, Katarina Berg.
A vodcast, if you like, on HR, straight across the counter. Sponsored by HR, the real deal, HR by HR for HR. Hello, Sonya.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are going to talk about workplace.
Excellent.
Yeah, and you are the head of workplace innovation and design at Spotify.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So before we move into that very, very interesting topic, why don't you share a little bit of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I am Sonya. I'm an architect of 22 years. I used to work in London, but then for global companies doing lots of different fit outs. And then I came to Sweden about 10 years ago and worked on quite big projects, but then moved back into office design and worked on a project for Spotify. And then subsequently came into Spotify.
Yeah.
It's very different being inside than a consultant on the outside, I can say.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is the difference? So share with us.
What is the difference? The difference is that when you're a consultant on the outside, you're looking at the company and you're kind of dissecting it and you think you really understand it. Whereas when you're on the inside, you really can understand it. You understand the kind of philosophy much more deeply and you can kind of piece together, okay, these are the solutions, but you're less hesitant to make solutions. You're more interested in listening, and there's a main reason for that because you actually have to live in your design.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit scary as well. You're not only designing for 7,000 people, but you have to live in that house or these houses.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main reason.
That's the main reason,
yeah.
Exactly. And I know I've seen a few of your offices and I've seen some of your work and I think it's absolutely amazing. And I know that you have a thought about when you look at the offices and when you design the offices at Spotify. What are the sort of core, let's say, guidelines or principles that you work from?
Well, they're different for a dynamic workplace than they are for the offices. But what I saw when I came into Spotify was that all the offices were very different. Mm-hmm. And with a company in hypergrowth, you can kind of say that it was more sort of verging on a teenage company. And they didn't really know kind of where they wanted to go. So when you look at all of the different offices, that was telling the story that was like, oh, what do? We just have to build, and we have to get people into the offices.
Yeah.
And I think that there wasn't any kind of red thread through the design. So nothing looked like a Spotify office. So really dissecting that and pulling it apart and saying, okay, this is what we've got to play with. What are the good parts of each office? Listening in and seeing what do people want from an office? The culture, what is is it the experiential design people want, or is it the kind of snazzy spaces? What is it that people want? And then kind of making a global strategy for how you define that and then how you put that out there. And never in my wildest dreams would we have done kind of 20 or so offices in this period. But I think that has been an amazing opportunity because we've been able to take that red thread and pull it through all of them. But yeah, if you said the main ingredients, I would say take the base architecture, don't do too much to it.
Right.
Like keep it as raw as possible and obviously try and find the most that kind of interesting building. Doesn't have to be beautiful, but interesting. And then layer on all of the functions. So the IT, the kind of acoustics, all of the things that make the space work. And then layer on the third part, which is the experiential design.
Right.
And the experiential design, to be honest, is not the most expensive part of the design, but it's the bit that gets people excited and tells about the culture.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just love the way that you phrase this in the different buckets, because it is actually a complex work, right? Mm-hmm. To get a good office space, a good sense of feeling, and have it also practical and productive and social for the people when they join the office, right? Or when they come into the office. So why don't you elaborate a little bit on the experiential side?
Yeah, sure.
What is that for you?
So the experiential side is the part where you kind of go into an office building or any building and you know immediately who owns that building or whose space it is. Mm-hmm. So it's basically the epitome of what that, the brand, I guess the expression of the brand within a physical space or the physical manifestation of that brand.
And how do you get that?
How do you get that? So first of all, you have to listen in and you have to dissect. We worked a lot with brand and creative to understand, okay, what are the kind of key principles? And brand and creative has such a strong element in Spotify. That's where it separates Spotify from quite a lot of other companies, is that, you know, on our app or on our platform, you see the visual identity so clearly. And if that can be expressed in the physical space, you're on a winner, because
Definitely.
you know, if your space is kind of screaming audio, then you know this is what you want. You want people to come and hear the music, feel the beat, but also listen to podcasts, see what expansive products we have, but not in a kind of pushy way, in a very kind of subtle sit back way.
Right.
And you want people to be interested, I think, and excited, and want to take photos with stuff.
Right.
So it should just be an interesting and exciting space, kind of like a gallery, in that kind of sense, where you see something and then you look a little bit further and you're like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, well, or maybe they did that because of this or that.
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit inquisitive.
Yeah. And it seems like also like you get this explorative curiosity when you get into the office. Like you want to explore, you want to see more, right?
Yeah, for sure. You want to see more around the office, and also you want to see maybe you're kind of, when you're pulled into an office, there are all the kind of practical elements like the security gate. So like in BJG, one of our offices, when you come in through the door, there's a long tunnel and it kind of feels a little bit like nightclub.
Right.
But then when you kind of pass the point that you're kind of not allowed to pass, you feel like, oh, cool, I've been let in.
Yeah.
You know, it is kind of like that kind of experience of like standing outside a nightclub and feeling, oh yeah, it's coming. Like, you know, I can feel the beat, all of that kind of thing. And I think that that's the experience you want to exude, that there's some kind of excitement in coming into that space.
Love it. I get goosebumps when you talk about this. I want to go to the club. So at Spotify, you launched the Work From Anywhere program. What does that mean? And we talked about it in earlier pods. What does that mean for the workplace and your work?
So I think just as when we were defining what dynamic workplace meant, which was just before Work From Anywhere was coming in,
right.
But we were thinking about the distributed first program.
Right.
We were thinking, how can we kind of rationalize this? And we generally think in buckets of 3, as you've noticed.
Yes.
But if you think about that choice of that Work From Anywhere offers you, like choice to be at home, choice to be in the office, choice to be elsewhere in a co-working space or whatever. I think the same applies to your workspace. You should have much more choice. One size doesn't fit all. So when you look at the office landscape, I suppose what you're saying is, hey, we had a really big problem with people going into meeting rooms because they didn't feel comfortable about talking in the open landscape. And we saw low utilization because we were traveling so much. And then if you try and piece that back to what's the solution to that, maybe you should take those meeting spaces out of the meeting rooms and pull them into the open landscape. So whilst you're doing that, so you're making focus areas, you're making kind of creative collaboration areas as well as desking.
Right.
So people can kind of move around depending on what they want to do, but not so stiff as activity-based working, in the sense that you do still have neighborhoods, and that's super important.
Right.
And then the next step of that is, how do you kind of piece that together with Work From Anywhere? Well, it's kind of it's a natural fit, to be honest. The fact that you've got the choice in the office and then you've got choice of where to work, that it fits quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, it does for sure. And the way that you describe it is, if I understand correctly, if you come into the office, you should actually have areas where you could do the work regardless of what kind of work you would like to do, right? Does that also mean that you have like focused areas for silent work, for focused work?
Yeah, so I think what's important, a lot of people miss there's a lot of talk about it at the moment, of course. Like a lot of companies are looking at each other thinking, what should I do? The most important thing is that you don't copy paste what someone else has done.
Say that again. That's important. Say that again. We have to repeat that.
You don't copy paste what someone else has done.
And why don't you copy paste?
You don't copy paste because the cultures are completely different, and you need to listen to the culture that you're creating within your office, and then assimilate the kind of workspace, or co-create even better the kind of workplace you want to be in. And actually, that's an important point, because if you, as an architect as well, if you create a space for someone and you don't listen appropriately, the person who gets that space will not be happy in the end.
Correct.
But on that journey, it's too hard a journey for them to take on their own, because they don't know what they're creating. They can't visualize maybe what is going to be on the end. So if you say to HR, who works completely differently to finance, who works completely differently to sales, what do you want? And you give them a kit of like 15 parts, and you say, okay, choose your parts. What do you want? To focus more, collaborate more? Which do you want? Then they have actually created their space within that are kind of parcel of the building.
Right.
But then you layer on, of course, you have to have the focus spaces because, as I said, I didn't quite finish my real thought there, but if you don't have, a lot of people think you're coming into the office to focus, to collaborate, sorry.
Right.
But some people are coming into the workplace to focus.
True.
And it's super important to make those retreat spaces, especially if you're talking about neurodiverse design. You have to have spaces where you can get away from the open plan or from the hubbub to actually kind of focus in on what you need to do. So it's super important that you think of this choice not just being only about collaboration.
Correct. And not only about meeting and socializing.
Yeah, and the socializing spaces, maybe you need to shrink them down or condense them so you get that real impact. I mean, if you're in this super huge, here's the club analogy again, but if you're in this super huge club with like so many rooms and you spend an hour and a half walking around. But if you're kind of in a really small club and then you're kind of packed together, you're kind of, you're more not forced to talk to everyone, but you suddenly feel like, okay, I have to be comfortable in this space. And then you feel like, okay, cool. This is the space for this. You don't get too dissipated. So I think generally people don't look at the building and kind of really analyze enough what the building is saying.
Right.
And then layer on the culture. Because if you have the building, the culture, and then you come out with a kind of co-creation piece, it's so much stronger than just having one or the other part.
Exactly.
And it's not about ego.
No. And the reason why I wanted you to stress that again, don't copycat, is because I think sometimes when you see offices that look similar, right? But in different companies. And then you can clearly see that it's the same architect who's been here, but you don't sense the culture, you don't sense the uniqueness, you don't sense that particular company's brand, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I think that is important because this is obviously something that the workplace should also tell the story of who you are, right?
Definitely, and that's so important. I think if I look at the portfolio of work that I've done as an architect, it very much is different. There are sort of tricks that, of course, have been used throughout the periods, like funneling in people in a certain way, or kind of like the flows. But that's the kind of basis of it. But when you look at the companies, they're so different from one to another, and that's the way it should be.
Yes.
It needs to be coming from within. And also, I think there is a tendency at the moment to, there's obviously a lot of press about it, but to look at the most pristine offices and think, that's what I want, that's my goal. But actually, maybe that's not what your product is, or that's not who your audience is.
True.
And I think one of the MDs, because we work quite closely with the MDs, when they say this is what the office should do, we always ask what should the office do for you?
Right.
Why do you need this office? And they're quite strong about it. We're a sales office or we're an R&D office, whichever it is.
Yeah.
We need an office where we want employees to work for Spotify. We want newcomers to be hooked in and to understand our culture and to be the same as us, to be part of a team. But we want to have partners who want to work with us. We want artists and labels who want to come in and see, to be energized by it and to be kind of, heightened by this experience. So there's a lot of different parameters. It's not just, okay, we don't need an office because, but they don't delve deep enough into, okay, what can this actually do for you as a backdrop?
Exactly. I think you explained this so very nicely, and there are some really good truth in what you're saying. Sorry. So, and you said this earlier also, you're asking people, you talk about the MDs, but also the employees. How often are you actually asking the Spotifyers of, is the workplace good enough, or what should we improve, and so forth? How often do you do that, and in what shape and form?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think we're verging more into doing that. I think everyone is very survey fatigued, let's say.
Yes.
So it's a very tricky line of, in GWS, are we really kind of going to overload people with surveys? But I think what we've tried to do is take it more into the project to say, okay, what don't you like about your office now? What can we improve? Where do you want to be? Like, what's your kind of, because you need to build the foundations, of course, to give everyone what they need just to be able to work. But then what is that kind of like top office going to look like? And it's not really about the looks, it's about what they need to do with that office.
Exactly.
But yeah, in that we always have a steering group, we have a reference group. The reference group isn't just the MDs. I would say it's actually more about the MDs finding a reference group who is a cross-section, probably from sales, from HR, from finance, from all of these kind of great buckets that we have, And then really kind of like working with them throughout the whole project. So it's not just at the beginning, it's keep on going back to them, communicating. And this communication is super duper key, because the communication at the beginning is, hey, we're going to do something in the office. Great, this is going to be amazing. And then it's like, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. So, but then you kind of draw it out to them, and then they're like, okay, yeah, this would be really great, or this could give me, if I had this area, then I could actually do this and this and this, and we could do yoga here, and we could have a stage, or we, all of the possibilities suddenly start to light up. I must say something differently though that we've done in Spotify has been, we have half of our employees are R&D.
Right.
And so it's really important when you look at how we've solved for dynamic workplace and this flexible, sustainable well-being, that we carry that on to R&D. But historically, engineers don't really want to have a flexible workstation.
Right.
They want to have their workstation, and that's
a fixed one.
Yeah, and that's key to their productivity.
Yeah.
But instead of, and then we layer on the parameters of office and home mix. So you're not going to be we're not going to give a home mix desk to someone one-to-one.
Right.
Because of course that would be super wasteful, because they're not going to be there probably 4 days a week.
Right.
But the way that we can control it is flip the narrative on a desk booking system and say, hey, here's a tool you can use to secure your own desk for 6 months, up to a year, whatever it is. And then, you have your fixed space, but it means when you go away, or if you're home mix, you can come in and see where, people are sitting. So it's kind of a tool that isn't used in a direct, what everyone knows that desk booking tool is used for kind of hot desking. That's not what it is. It's much more about securing and looking at kind of what that employee's needs are, and looking on the physiological or the psychological needs of, okay, I need to have this space to do my work.
Right.
So that's why it's so important, again, not to copy paste, to kind of look at, what are the tools available for us?
Beautiful, and I think you touched on an important point here, just to say that, especially for R&D in this case, their needs may differ from other departments, right? And how do you solve those needs in a best way for them, right? Lovely. So what are the plans for the future? What are you currently working on, and what are the things that you're preparing to launch?
In the future, right? Yeah. So, as I said, we were really lucky to be able to do all of the offices that we have done, and had a super good co-creation with people who have enabled us to get to somewhere very quickly. But it wasn't about pumping out those offices. It was about making everything flexible and making everything work for when we came back, so that you could migrate back into the office easily with the standardized IT, so home and office mix could be equal or more equitable.
Yeah.
And then it gave us the chance to fix all the stuff that we needed to fix as well.
Right.
Especially on the neurodiverse level with the signage and retreat spaces, and then also on the kind of accessibility level where we weren't so great before, so physical accessibility. The future, I think now we're not in this rat race to come to the office at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5, right? We're looking for a space that really gives us something back. And I don't think that that's just about the space. I think that the space is the backdrop for this, and the space should flexibly offer, kind of a place where situations can happen. So as long as you've got enough choice, or enough choice of places, then you can have enough choice of programming that you can put on top of it. And I think the programming part of it, the Community X part of it, the heart and soul part of it, all of that has to feed in. The diversity belonging part of it. I feel very happy that we've made this kind of basis everywhere, so it's very equitable globally for people to kind of use the space. But I do think that there's going to be a change in how you use offices now.
And what do you think, what will that change look like?
For Spotify, for Spotify directly, I think it will be a lot more about socializing, a lot more about getting people into the office. You can see how much of a big impact food has, for example, how much of a big impact the choice of spaces. But also, I think if you're looking at we put a stage in every one of our offices, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So that offers up not only the platform for people in the office to get up onto a stage and do their own all hands and get everyone involved, but it offers up the opportunity for an artist to come in and do a pop-up. Right. So that's pretty exciting. And then the stage can also be, kind of yoga / yoga in the morning, then, cafe at lunchtime and in the evening. So
It's a very sustainable way of using.
Hopefully we've multi-used.
Exactly. Well,
I mean, multi-use is good, but it's also complicated because you have to make sure that it is acoustically sound.
Right.
But that's good because that fits into the Spotify profile anyway.
It does for sure. Oh, what a great work you've done so far, Sonya.
Thank you. It's not just me, by the way. It's a
I know,
huge team.
It's a team.
huge team.
I know.
Yeah.
It's always about the team.
Yeah,
always about
It
the
is.
team. Lovely. Thank you so much. So many good thoughts there and a lot of inspiration. I'm sure that we will invite you back in a few months' time to see where, what has happened now since you reopened the offices and what were the learnings and,
And what are the experiences? I mean, physical offices are one thing, then the home office. How can we improve the home office?
Exactly.
So I think we have to do things in equilibrium. And then, what is maybe the third office can be a virtual office. So there's lots of things that are kind of hanging in the...
You see? That's the cliffhanger.
That's the cliffhanger, right?
That's the cliffhanger for the next pod.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know how we close these sessions?
Yes.
You do?
I'm not sure I'll get it right.
You will. Shall we?
Yeah, I'll try.
Let's do it.
Stay strong, stay safe, stay active.
Idemo dalje. Sonya.
I think I got them in the wrong order.
Yeah, you did.
Because you want to say stay strong first.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay active.
Stay safe. I can't say it because it's like stay safe.
Yeah, there's something
really weird. Yeah. You have to stay strong.
So who do we blame? Katarina. Yeah, it's Katarina. Look at her. We have to blame her.
Just sitting there, just working in the sun.
The three things always tricky.
What do you say again at the end? Stay safe, stay strong, stay active.
And then we say idemo dalje together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Of
Idemo
course.
dalje.
Yeah, but after I've talked, I'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And then I will forget. Idemo dalje.
Idemo dalje.
Then we recalibrate. Show face on.
Okay.